an informative speech about the Black Death. Imagine you're a commoner living in Europe during the mid 1300s. You have a terrible sickness nobody has ever seen before. You feel extremely weak, and you have strange boils all over your body. You ask for a doctor, but all you get is a strange man in a crow mask rubbing dead animal carcasses over you and force feeding you mercury and vinegar. As strange as this may sound, this was a very real reality for those who were living in the era of the Black Death. Caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the Black Death was one of the most dangerous and deadly diseases in known time. Today I'm going to be discussing how dangerous the Black Death is because of its symptoms, area of effect, and medical practices that failed to prevent the plague. Let's begin by discussing the symptoms of the Black Death. According to the Center of Disease Control, also known as the CDC, there are three main types of the plague, which are bubonic, septicemic, and pneumonic. The bubonic plague is the least dangerous of the three, with a mortality rate of only 30 to 60%. I say only 30 to 60% because the other two plagues are a lot worse. The symptoms, according to the CDC, include a sudden onset of fever, headache, chills, weakness, and one or more swollen lymph nodes known as bubbos. And in case you didn't know what those are basically swollen boils found near the groin, neck, and armpit that are extremely tender and painful to touch. While that may sound bad, the next step of the plague gets even worse. The next stage is called the septicemic plague. That has a 100% mortality rate if you don't get medical treatment quickly, and in most cases it is cured. The symptoms for the septicemic plague are all the same as the bubonic plague, with the added effects abdominal pains, shock, and bleeding from the skin and other organs. People may also notice that their skin begins to turn black. That is because their skin cells are dying due to a lack of oxygen. Now, here comes the real crazy part. If you're lucky to survive through the septicemic plague, you move on to the next stage known as the pneumonic plague, which is even more deadly than both of the two combined, and even with modern practices, is very hard to cure. The symptoms of the pneumonic plague, according to the CDC again, include patients who develop fever, headaches, weakness, and rapid developing pneumonia with shortness of breath, chest pains, cough, and sometimes bloody or watery mucus. Patients or infected patients also gain the ability to infect others due to infectious droplets from all the coughing they do. Really. Symptoms, while scary, aren't the only thing that make this disease deadly. The area of effect really helped but also, while the symptoms are scary, the amount of areas it affected also made the plague even more dangerous. The plague first emerged in Mongolia and is theorized to come from infected fleas from local rodents. The Mongolians, seeing how deadly this disease was, decided to weaponize it and essentially become the first users of bio warfare. They would launch infected bodies over the city walls of Kaffa, modern-day Feodosia in Crimea, and infect the city. Survivors of the city would essentially flee because nobody wants to stay in an area where they're gonna die. And according to John Seven's article on the Black Death, the fleeing residents would spread into mainland Italy first. Now, Italy wasn't the only one to get taken over by the Cathans. According to John 7 again, the infected would go into the Persian Empire, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland, and south to Egypt, as well as Cyprus. This shows that Europe wasn't the only place affected by the plague, but also Northern Africa and a majority of the Middle East. In a short span of time, Eurasia and Northern Africa would be infected with the plague and essentially crippled. However, the area of effect wasn't the only thing that made the plague worse. Medical practices during the time made living through the plague all much worse. Medical practices during this time, to put bluntly, was terrible. People during this time would employ a certain practice called animal cures. And one of the most popular one of the animal cures was, according to John J. Joshua's article on medical cures for the Black Deaths from worldhistory.org, was to find and kill a snake, chop it into pieces, and rub it over various parts of swollen bubbos. This was supposedly supposed to draw out bad vibes in a way, but really, it just made a disease worse because rubbing all kinds of germs all over you. Pigeons were also used, but to no better effect. You just ended up with a dead person every time. People would also use supposed unicorn horns to heal people, and obviously this wouldn't work because unicorns aren't a thing. People would also begin to resort to religion and gather together, and according to Josh J. Mark, purchase religious amulets and charms, prayers, fasting, tending mass, persecuting those they thought was responsible. This didn't really help with stopping the plague because people were gathering in mass, really spreading disease further, and as people disperse, they disperse the plague. Conclusion: the death plague is a deadly disease. It should not be anything to scoff at. Symptoms, area of effect, and the archaic medical techniques show how the plague was especially dangerous during this time. You may be wondering how an archaic plague is relevant to today's society. And to that, I mentioned COVID. Many of us may have known somebody or have personally experienced COVID, and were lucky enough to get proper medical treatment. However, people during this time were not able to have the same luxury as us to get the same medical treatment that we have now. So the next time you have a cough and take some cough medicine, just really appreciate how far we have advanced medically, and that we no longer have to bathe in animal carcasses and drink mercury and vinegar. Thank you.